Alright guys, big welcome to our channel.
Yeah.
We are team crushing the meta, and today we finally have Dave on the channel. You guys have requested this deck profile multiple occasions, multiple profiles that we post on Facebook and YouTube, and you guys were like, where is the Gear Chronicle profile? Well, finally, here it is.
It's here.
Yes. So Dave is our specialist when it comes to Gear Chronicle. He's as crazy about gears as I'm about Spike and some about Bermuda. Huh? Sparkles?
What's my
Aren't you revealed?
Aren't revealed. Yeah.
Okay.
Not yet. Maybe next week. So Dave did actually so well with this deck. We had two big events in the Netherlands. He was able to get to the finals on both occasions.
One in Arnhem and one in Zwolle.
Yeah, and the first one he played against Chris Floris, which is our Nuba specialists. If you want to see that deck, the deck is also on the channel. It's a Nubatama deck, of course, Nubatama specialist. And in the other tournaments in Zwolle, we had to play against each other in the finals. We didn't play that match. We played it today, but we'll not talk about it for reasons.
Yeah.
So
Missing reason.
Yeah, so we will keep saying that we both are in the finals, and we still don't know who got first place. Okay, so before we talk about the deck, because the deck is very interesting, the way it's built. It has a interesting playstyle into it. It needs a high skilled player to use it, and there are a lot of issues with the deck, but you could fix them playing correct. So
and some issues you make yourself just to gain some more power in the later stage of the game or something like
it's
that.
pretty much, when it comes to gears, which Dave could explain later, but gears in my eyes was always a deck that is very consistent, but you could make it less consistent by making it better, but you have to search that fine line in between inconsistent and less options.
Consistency and power. That's
Power slash options.
Precisely.
Okay.
So if you want to run the more tech options and less inconsistent pieces like Chronicle, for example, or something like that.
And even in G, Gears had that. You could play multiple copies of a card, but you actually
with
need
the time leap engine or the CTB engine, you could just search out a specific card. Metallic split packages, and metallic finish with time leap and everything. So
let's first go through the deck. After that, come back and explain it, because I think most of you guys are especially very interested in the way the deck is built. After that, we will explain the choices of the card, and then at the end of the video, we'll explain how the deck kind of works. So for you guys who will see it for the first time and try to rebuild it, at least you have an idea on how the deck works. Because
you have many options to build this deck around. Many tech options. I play quite few tech options in this build, but that is because I want to go for power actually instead of the consistency. So I will just begin with starter and go over from the grade 4s to the grade 0s. So first of all, I play the ChronoJet.
Best boy.
You play jet build, why not play ChronoJet? It's the one and the same, only a little bit smaller. So just nice on right, get a draw, so you can go for your pieces much further and get a quick shield afterwards. If you go second, of course.
Which is always a plus.
And then for the grade 4s, I will explain this later. I play 2 next stages. If you go first, you can just ride this, and if you go straight, you have also some use out of it. And just for the time leap engine, you can time leap into it. And if you go first, we play the 1 Metallica Phoenix just to get a turbo drive off and get a free marker. So then I play the star of this deck, and the only reason we play it is because of the name.
Marker and name.
Precisely.
If this card was a vanilla, it would have been better.
Cyclone, that deck.
I mean in premium, not in standard. But
of course, So ChronoJet, he is our main grade 3 of this deck. We prefer to ride him, of course, and
SP boy.
Nice one.
Yeah.
I'm happy to have it in SP 4 times. And just get a marker so you can abuse it as hell in this deck, because if you have 1 marker, you can multi-attack sometimes like 4 to 7 times on it and punish your opponent really hard for it. So then 1 other grade 3, so we're actually playing 5 grade 3s, so that's another part in why the consistency is quite bad in this deck when it comes to the grade 3s. But we play this grade 3 because it's a real powerhouse. So what it does is you can bind the card from your hand when it's placed, so your opponent has to guard with 2 cards from the hand every time to need to guard an attack. So if you go for 11 attacks in a turn, your opponent is on 5, they potentially need to guard with 22
cards, which is insane.
Insane, yeah. I only play it with 1 because I feel that's enough, because it's a finisher combo. So if your opponent is like on 2, you don't really use it, not in the early game.
And you could get it, you could time leap into it, right?
Yeah, you can time leap into it straight away if you want to. That's why it's a tech option, of course, and it's a grade 3, which is a nice grade to time leap into.
Yeah.
So for the grade 2s, this is another part for the consistency. I play 4 Air Cup. I have to say I use his first skill list that you can counter blast 1, discard 1 to get a drive check off, but that's because we primarily use the counter blast for other resources in the early game, but we play it for that it's being a stride fodder if you go for a stride, because he can be counted as a grade 3, which is fine for your jet, of course, to spear right into a grade 4, and it's also nice just to have the extra consistency that we don't have to run extra stride fodders to go for our strides, and it's just a 10k grade 2.
And the first ability could come in handy if you have some dead cards in your hand.
If
you have the piano grade 3, which you definitely don't want to ride into, you would rather G-assist, and you could just drop it. You could of course guard with it or just drop it, but it's better.
But now you have more value out of it.
Yeah,
it's just an less bricky option. If you don't have your pieces on hand, you can at least use his first skill to
get to your pieces or to triggers.
Yeah, it's just a Blessed Dark skill only for counter blast, but you can use it every time you want.
It will always be a strong card that you could always rerun, even with the new cards.
Definitely. So we play 4 History Maker. So this is the one card that makes up the entire time leap engine for a part of it. It's one of the Elite Fours. Just when it attacks, you can time leap a unit, and what time leap means actually is you can bind one of your units and call a great high from your deck. So that's where the part comes when you can just search for any card in your deck that's a great higher. So even if you're playing like 1 piano, you have like a 1 Air Cup in your deck, you can just search out your piano to get the skill off. So really nice card, just a multi-tech extender, and just for a nice counter blast, which isn't like really.
It's not that much.
No.
Normally these cards were actually the Amber clones, which needed to be boosted and then pay the counter blast. But because Gears got 2 trial decks in the G era, they first got Umber, that's why they call it Umber clone.
Yeah, and this one is the one that doesn't need to be boosted. Yeah, which is really nice because if you get the stand trigger off, you can attack once again.
You could re-attack with it, and because it's on attack, not on place, you could keep doing it.
Yeah,
you have the on place version of it, which is the Clock Grade 2, right?
We have 2 actually. We have 2 Grade 2s that on place can bind or time leap unit. It's Clock Fence, I guess, and another one like something dragon or something.
Yeah, I know that one as well.
Yeah,
I remember Clock Fencer because it's an SP.
yeah, true. A very cheap SP also.
It's to be a beautiful SP.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can look at me that way, but SPs have a special place in my heart.
Yeah. Yeah. Laura, for instance, just gave me that card once because it's just like a few cents.
I wonder why.
It's because we don't have that much, but SPs are beautiful, especially full art.
Yeah. So for History Maker.
Yes.
And for the last running Grade 2, I decided to play 2 Bobo. This needs further explanation when we go over the main deck.
So 10 Grade 2s.
Yeah, 10 Grade 2s. But for now, just remember I just played 2 Bobos.
Yeah.
And that's really about it.
Explain later.
Yeah. So, this is the weird part. 4 Temposphere. Premium Collection, best card, definitely. So, you could say, why play 4 orders? Because this deck is really GB reliant, you only need 1, but you want it as soon as possible. Yeah. Primarily on your Grade 1 or Grade 2 turn. So, yes, you need it as soon as possible, so that's why we play 4. It screws with the consistency, because as you can see later we play 12 Grade 1s, which are, which have 8
on 4.
8 Grade 1 white targets.
Yep.
Yeah, that's just miserable to write into. If you play 8 Grade 1 white targets, you will definitely G-assist, but we take that risk for the power.
And that's why when playing against this deck, you could see multiple times that your opponent would like put all 5 cards back and redraw the whole hand just to get into the Grade 1.
Yeah, definitely. If you have like something in Grade 2, I would just throw it away just to get back Grade 1.
But as long as you ride into Grade 1 and then you have the one Melem in hand and the one Tempest Spear, you're good to go.
Yeah, precisely.
You're good to.
Yeah, because you can tutor out your ChronoJets, which also we play 5 of. So we have a risky grade 1 ride and a risky grade 3 ride.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Your grade 2 ride is alright, and your grade 1 ride, you don't want to ride into Melon. Maybe if you have 2, you could, but
that's just not preferable. Yeah. So, as we have said, we play 4 Melon. The star of this deck, actually the order of the grades are different in this deck because normally the beaters are on the grade 2s and the supporting cards are on the grade 1s. But in this deck it's the other way around. Yeah. Since the Melon is actually the beater of this deck and History Maker is more the extender. So really nice effect, just gains 4k on attack to put it to the bottom of the deck at the end of the battle and tutor out a grade 0.
Melem is the card that abuses that force markers.
Yeah, really hard.
The most. That's why going first with this deck, creating that second force marker means you will hit for higher numbers.
And because you can have GB early life with the Tempest Sphere, you can even abuse this hell of a lot more. Yeah. If you're like on grade 3, your opponent is on grade 2, Melem swings for 21k. On your opponent's 10k most of the time, and that's just a perfect number because even if they have a defense trigger, you can still bash them really hard.
For you guys who have played Vanguard in the G era, there is a big explanation why Gears was for quite some time a tier 0 deck. Yeah. The thing is, talking about the G era, you had a cost for everything you do. And comparing a clan like Spikeless to Gear Chronicle, with Spikes you lose a counterblast and a card from your hand to make that extra attack. With Gear Chronicle, it was not free, it was the other way around. So what you had is using the Melon with combination with History Maker and with Urwatar.
You can go for counterblast 1, get an extra attack, get an extra card instead of minusing a card. Yeah. So you have a card difference of 2. Yeah. And most of the time you can do the same search. Yeah.
And what makes this deck very strong and consistent and multi-attacking is that you could do this in the early game, which is not meant to be possible.
They thought they stopped us with zazan 2-1, but
I mean zazan is very hard to get off in this deck. Yeah. And it's just having that one counterblast. And even, I mean, you get nothing from it. Maybe sometimes you get a heal trigger or a trigger to your hand.
For now we only have the heals that are vanillas for Tempest Sphere.
Exactly. But mostly it's just for that one CB.
Yeah, precisely. Because
for the one
going GB. -1 on this makes up for the fact that you have GB and that you can get pluses off that way. Yeah, precisely. And with zazan 2-1 we cannot use the upstream combo anymore. That's a little bit sad, but understandable, so we abuse the hell out of this one. Yeah. Now, good explanation. And then for once, consistency, I play for Chronotooth. Chronotooth is here just to get your extra draw when on Vanguard Circle. And if you go first, your opponent gives you a counterblast, and you have like, for example, Melon on hand, or maybe 2 Melons on hand, and you have a Tempest Sphere, you can just say, okay, I don't ride this turn. You still get the card for free for the ride effect.
And you get first strike.
Yeah, most of the time because you already have 3 big attacks coming for your opponent.
That's what I said. This is a high skilled deck. Yeah. You have to know your opponent. You have to know the matchup.
But it's not always the best option.
No, exactly.
Because sometimes yes, you have your Melons, yes, you have your Tempest Sphere, but some decks abuse that grade 3 turn so much and their stride not that really that you.
Then you would rather be on grade 3 already and get that extra marker so you could finish them off on the next turn.
Yeah, you have to know your matchup for that. So that's really about it. Yeah. It's the tank shield, which is really nice. The deck really needed that in the past because before the ChronoFang support came out, we didn't have a good grade 1, and this replaced that spot. So
that's one of the things that I had troubles with playing my G decks in Premium. Is some people don't know it until they play it. And that's those G decks have those less shield grade 1s.
And the 7k is also really.
And the 7k. And which in the first glance it doesn't really seem like a big problem, but it does make a big difference.
Because let's say for example you have a grade 1 that pushes for more damage, but if you swing under on the first grade 1 turn, it's the same difference because you essentially dealt the damage later, for example, or something like that. So in that, yes, it's more aggro, but with the 8k, 10k shields, you have like a better ride target, a better shield value, and with that you can go for your final push more often instead of just having that.
And it's overall just a very good card.
Yeah.
But both of its abilities are of course amazing.
Really good. I have to say the second ability we don't use that as often since
It's kind of counterblast heavy.
Yeah, true. And in this deck we don't really discard much with our main deck or essentially that. The only cards that are discarding in this deck are some strides, and that's really about it.
Yep.
So yeah.
But it's possible to get off.
Yeah, it's possible you have air cup still, or just stride with
Sometimes you have a lot of counterblasters if you're playing against a rush deck or something.
Yeah, or just stride with 3 of them.
Exactly. Counterblast 3, call all 3 to the background.
Osrest, okay, thanks. Okay, so for the trigger lineup, I play 2 stride crits, 2 go into soul, and draw crits. So why we only play the 2 stride crits is because we already have 4 stride fathers in the sense that we have air cup. We have enough consistency with that, and the fact that you can also do out your ChronoJet, so you have extra stride fathers in that way. The reason why we play the crit that goes into soul to give you power 10k and to draw a card is because of Melon. If you go into the early game, your Melon swings for like 11k attack, your opponent gets a defensive, you can just go into this one. Yes, you're losing a trigger on attack, but your Vanguard gains like 10k, which can overpass your opponent once again.
But you will get it later. You get the value later.
Yeah, really.
And it would be a good booster for History Maker.
Yeah, or for Melon, for the 21 swing, they get the defensive and you can go for like 25 after.
Yeah, which hits everything.
Yeah, precisely. So, and we only play 4 crits in this deck because this deck most often just want to push 1 damage at a time instead of going all out.
You want to have control over your opponent's damage.
So we also play the 3 Overturn and the 1 Vainglory Dream Gearcat.
Interesting.
Yeah, I only play 3. I felt like I had enough Overturns or Melons on hand when it comes to the consistency part, but I wanted to add an extra stand. Just because I like the factor that you play Rainbow in the sense, and the fact that if you stand your History Maker, you get essentially 2 attacks off for Counterblast, and you get an extra draw of it. So it's a semi-draw trigger in that sense.
Yeah, and it's unexpected most of the time for your opponent. That stand trigger in the early game, also in the late game, could make a huge difference and could win you the game.
Yeah, and in the early game, when your opponent doesn't have that big of a hand and can't really guard that efficiently because they don't have maybe a lot of 10k shields or 5k shields or 15k shields, you can just irritate your opponent on that way.
Yeah, and what you want them to do is you want them to guard and lose those valuable cards.
Yeah, precisely, because if they need to guard with 5k, most of the time the grade 2s are very important.
Yeah, so, and they don't want to give up maybe more shield value. And sometimes they even discard like a heal trigger, which could be a G-Guard later on.
Yeah.
So it's good. It's very good.
But why I played the Vainglory Dream Gearcat, his effect didn't come up anytime soon. It's just for the fact that your opponent needs to counterplay around it. The opponent will put more resources into it to remove it than for you to put on the field, which is why it's a good card in my opinion.
It's another card you could end your combo with.
Yeah, precisely. If you're playing
like the crits.
Yeah, yeah, true. Because ending with a Overtar doesn't really do that much. Or if you're playing against Vanquisher, which can bind your entire field, so it's still off. Yeah.
Sure.
So yeah, with that I play 4.
Does it work? He works against Narukami, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just when it's being bound. Doesn't mean if it's bound from records. Yeah. So 4 draw triggers. We in the past I played like the 3-1 ratio, where I played the grade 1 PG, the timely PG, but because we want to have that big important powerhouses in the deck, we have less space for the actual tech options. In the past I played like maybe 4 or 5 tech options in the grade 1 department, but for now we need our spaces in there, so we need the draw triggers. Hello birds. I don't know if you guys hear that, but there are ignoring birds in the background.
Annoying? They were nice. They were saying hello.
They were birds, actually.
You think they were children?
Or really crazy parrots, but one or the other.
Okay, sure.
Okay, ignore it.
Whatever.
But also the fact it's just a draw, so you can go in for your pieces more often.
Yeah.
Just having a drawing into your melon is like good shit. Yeah. Ignore it. Oh, those are really children.
Yeah.
I thought that was birds. And over here it's okay. So
it's fine.
and then 4 of
It's
the
not a bird.
beautiful hue triggers.
Oh damn.
It's a
Yeah,
bird.
very
Okay.
expensive, but
Oh damn, I'm so happy they didn't do this with the other sets.
Adelaide.
Yeah.
Wedding
exactly.
SV Adelaide.
Dang. Well, the thing is, because it's an SP, I would have to play it. So I'm happy it's
You
not.
still have to play Adelaide.
I will never play Adelaide.
You
I will see you back on that one. Oh.
I could see me going into tournaments and my friends changing my deck with 4 Adelaides and just the deck list as well.
Ah,
and
can
then,
you give you a deck?
yeah, and then
Or-
entering and
Or
having
I
the
just
deck
give you
list.
my spike deck.
Yeah, I will never trust anybody with giving my deck list because of Adelaide. It's the only reason.
But for Ulewoods, just to have your powerful G cards on hand and having a 10k difference instead of the 5k power is just nice. Make your numbers.
It's just
Better.
a beautiful card.
Yeah.
It's just beautiful. And the only card you could add to your hand with Tempest.
Yeah, that's the big important part. If it were the counter soldier shields, then you can then. Then I have 3 cards left, so sorry.
Yeah.
But we are done with the triggers, the great ones, so what am I playing? Starters! So as we have said, not Ubertar, Melem can actually search out your great zeros, and that's why we played these 3, just to do them out. This one can fetch your ChronoJet, and these can extend your attacks. So with that, you can go for far complicated plays, where you go for your Melem, then go into your ChronoJet for the end combo, go for your ChronoJet that has the guard restrict, etc, etc. These are just attack extenders that have really powerful effects. TikTok also has the time leap ability, which works really great with your G-zone, and yeah, just works really great with combos. I will explain the Melem combo later, just after.
I think the only 2 flexible cards in the deck actually are one of him and maybe one of the Great Force.
Yeah. For what I playing now, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking about maybe changing one next stage to something other, like an extra grade 1 or something like that, just to add to the consistency. I first played it with 1, but then I realized if your opponent is like damage denying you, you only have 1 counter plus, he comes up for more often. And if you're doing that, then you don't have a TikTok left for your strike turn. So with this, you have 1 in the early game and 1 in the strike turn.
Sometimes your opponent would be counting your attacks, and this is the only card that could make an unexpected attack. Because especially if they expect you playing 1.
Yeah. And if your opponent is not reading your cards or doesn't know what the deck actually does, because just say it, nobody really plays Gear Chronicle in our
not at this level, let's say.
And yeah, personally I don't like the way Gear Chronicle is presented in the premium format by most people, because most people think it's a bad clan for now just because of the support. But as you can see, you can make
one of the things that makes us so kind of different.
Yeah.
And we talked about this in the past, like some of us would like to stick with one clan and put so much time and effort into it to create the better version out of the clan. And you can see like with some clans that's very rewarding. I mean, talking to Chris about his Nubatama in Standard, like putting so much time and effort into it, but never really getting into that level of play that you want to get. But now with Dave, like he could see the results of all of that testing, printing the card beforehand, before the support come out, thinking about the format, testing it, so much time and hours put into it, and 2 big events, 2 finals,
not coincidence.
No,
if you can say that.
Yeah, if people talk about lucky, then it's not luck. It's just skill and.
Then I want to say, just play this deck for yourself. Play it on area, print it out, make the deck yourself.
But don't get frustrated if it doesn't work, because it's not easy to pilot.
You essentially need to say, okay, G-assist is in your game plan.
Yeah. And even if you say, let's say you take one of these out and you take one of the Great Force out to put 2 more Great Ones in the deck, that doesn't really make the deck better. No. Because
it makes it actually different.
Yeah, you actually rather G-assist into Tooth, but be on Tooth. Because G-assisting is not really that big of a problem because
No.
you're putting 2 cards away but getting 1 back, right?
Yeah, so you're going -1. But
Yeah.
with that -1, you can go for your better plays, for your powerful plays.
Yeah,
Because this Triton in this deck is now really scary
Yeah.
if your opponent is on early for damage, for example.
And every card you have extra in the deck, in these kind of decks, makes a huge difference
Yeah.
because it's not a combo piece. And that's why us that play premium are so happy with having draw PGs, different kind of strike folders, because now we have more space
Yeah.
to run different cards.
Yeah, and that you can play different crits, for example, and
Yeah.
understanding like that. But I have to say, if you're trying this deck, don't just stop by playing 10 games. This deck needs a lot more games to
Yeah.
pilot, because I don't want to say how much time I put into this deck just to play it.
The thing that they mostly forget when we preview these kind of decks is that we also have a kind of game plan with the deck, and that is something that is not easy being taken over.
No, you need to take over the entire play style, the entire idea of what your opponent is facing, what you're facing. Because if I'm playing against your Nubas, it's far different than if I play against your Spike Brothers or Chris's Skygrow deck.
Yeah.
And you need to know every.
Yeah.
every
And
deck.
you need to know your game plan before you draw. You stand and draw, and when you stand and draw, your hand change, and you think, okay, then I go this plan.
And
I go
because
that
you
plan.
have such little defense in comparison, you're playing the Grade 1 order, you have your 5k melons, and you have a lot of shield failure in your triggers, but you need to count for those. If you're misguarding, that can punish you really hard.
Yeah, and one more thing, misplaying is very punishing.
Yeah, one misplay because this deck, you need to assign your powers like Melon every time. Search the correct card. You can't just change it around in the middle of a combo.
No.
If you're like going into the corners run in the early game, or in the beginning of your combo, you're most of the time making a misplay, and it can screw you at the end of the combo. Because if you have like a ChronoJet left, yes, it's a cool ChronoJet, you can assign powers to it. But it's not a history maker that can make 2 extra attacks because he uses a skill, for example. And you need to know the beginning and the end of the route before you begin your turn, and that's where the power of this deck lies. It's also the surprise factor your opponent doesn't know about. Because if you're playing again, you essentially don't play the deck. For example, I just take an example. You don't play the deck. You don't know what's happening. You're just asking the opponent, "What are you doing?" constantly, and it's just like, okay, when are you going to stop? Because sometimes you do 13, 15 attacks. Once I did like 17 attacks in this deck, and then it's just like, okay, cool, bye bye. But
and the deck is lethal. The deck is very lethal in the early game. It's already
the Premium Collection did a really good job to this deck.
But again, it rewards better player highest skill. It's not the same as a vanilla Zazan or as a vanilla Tempest. It's very different in the playstyle, and maybe some people may say, well, it's still toxic. Well, play it first. Then argue.
Because Zazan isn't that big of a deal if you know what you're guarding for and what the opponent's grade 3 effect is. For example, for Nuba, if you're playing against Yami, just know what you're guarding, what you're guarding for, and what is your game plan and what's your winning image.
Again, we are not defending Zazan or Tempest in this case. We're defending this deck. So as we said, try this deck out, because we have seen a toxic Gear Chronicle deck in the past, which plays around Zazan. And you can't do anything about that.
With the 10 attack loop on the first grade.
You can't do anything about that.
And now you have finally counterplay for it.
And the power. The power on that deck made it different, because in this deck, if your opponent gets a defensive trigger in the early game, you kind of stop.
True.
You have to stop
before you made like 28k columns and everything. But shall we go over to Jizo?
Yes.
I think that's a good thing. Otherwise it's taking very long.
1 hour later.
1 hour later.
1 hour later.
So, we're playing the main strength of this deck. It's history build. It's the Premium Collection strength from 2019. It's a very powerful strength because when it attacks you can just Soul Blast 1, which isn't the cost in this deck because you have plenty of Soul. All these go into the Soul. And you can make 1 extra attack or 2 extra attacks out of it, because it time leaps to the units face being G-Zone +1. or not +1 equal to the face-up cards in your G-Zone actually. So if you have
But he flips. So.
yeah. So you flip, and you have again time leap 1.
Yeah.
And if you have like time leap 2 units, it's already really great. That's also why we play Temposphere, just to increase the lethality of the first strike, because time leaping 1 unit and time leaping 2 units is a
Huge
major difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the same for, like, example, if you're playing Granblue, reviving 2 units or reviving 4 units.
Yeah.
It's a major difference, because now you can extend your history maker one step further. You can extend
your plays are different.
Yeah, definitely.
And, he
But-
also gives power.
Yeah, he also gives power, Vanguard G-Zone skill. It's not a rearguard, not Nuba. It gives time leap units 3k, so your history maker can swing alone,
Yeah.
30, 12, 15, 17, 18.
Yeah.
The reason why I don't play actually a fourth one, because you can say it gives power, it has a G-Zone effect, why don't you play 4? The reason is simple, history maker and TikTok are the really only time leap units in this deck. It has the time leap keyword for the main deck, and having a 21k or an 18k history maker doesn't really make a difference. If you're playing like
It's the same.
it's the same.
Or
Yeah.
maybe if you're playing as an 11k base, then yes, man.
Yeah, it may is, but how often does that come up?
Not
It's
that
just how much do you think you are using the fourth one against? How powerful is
Yeah.
it? So, and TikTok, but that's
Yeah.
that's also really come up. You also need to know what you're flipping in this deck, because you can essentially flip a history maker. That's fine and dandy. The second stride you go into a history maker, and then you don't have any history makers left to stride into. You need to know what you're flipping, because if you flip like something as a history maker one step too much, then it can essentially mean you don't have a good stride turn. Because
That's what you meant with have a game plan.
yeah,
Know what you're gonna do next.
Temposphere most often flips this card already,
Mhm.
just because then it's a 12k attacker against a 10k Vanguard in the early game, because his G-Zone effect still goes off.
Because history is a 9k.
Yeah, precisely. But then you have 2 left, 1 flip, and then you're out of history makers or history builds. Yeah.
Right, next.
Next.
That's 2020?
No.
Is it 2020?
It's next stage.
It's 1985.
Something. Maybe clockwork since then. I don't know. No, next stage, just your reasonable Vanguard. His skill is a little bit outdated nowadays, just because it's discarding 3 to resend your Vanguard and get string drive, so you go -1. Most reasonable strides now have go like 0, card advantage, so you discard 3 and get 3 drive checks or something like that. But it's still a good finisher. You can combine it with history build, with a later stride, and that's essentially why you play it, just to go for the finishing combo. If you have 1 counter blast left, you just use this to go for that final push, get an extra stand trigger, and go for another round of attacks. So,
Question.
yeah.
Could you play 3? Because you play 2 next stages in the main deck. Rule wise.
Yeah, you can play 4 in the main deck and 4 in the G-Zone if you want to. I have searched up the comprehensive ruling on it just to make sure, but there was 1 token Remember card in the past that also had that interaction, where the main deck card has the same name as the stride, and you can essentially play 4 main deck cards and 4 stride fit. So that isn't the reason why you only play 2. You can also play 3 or 4 of this card.
But there's no reason to.
No. You have 1 finisher, and that's the turn you need to do it. 2 Ragnar Clock. This is, I think, the first triple rare or GR. I don't know. It's just SP, so I can see it. But it's one of the best strides Chronicle got.
So the evil full art SP.
No.
No.
Basic!
It's a Jeroen.
Yeah. But
It's a Jeroen.
nah, cool.
He's
No.
basic.
But it's one of the best strides Chronicle got in the early stages of the G era. It restricts your opponent from grade zeros, which is really weird for that time period, but it's great now.
Yeah.
Just because your opponent is playing the grade 0 PGs.
Yeah.
And with that you can restrict them. It gains a crit, but most often it's GB2 reliant, because you need to have 2 or more face-up cards in G-Zone.
There's 1 card you use it with, pretty much.
Yeah, but you can also go for it for a stride with Temposphere, which I did against Chris.
Yep.
Chris from Kagura with the Overlord build, because I played him against Swollen. He pushed me, I pushed him.
No.
He was at 4, I was like, okay, I make a big column now. 65, let's go. because I just filled up my entire field, so his G cards doesn't.
Kagero doesn't play grade 1 pages.
No, he played. He actually did, but he changed it before. So I was like, okay, I can go for this stride and have my time leap rear guards on the rear guard circle, but I just went to this. So it's just the surprise factor that your opponent also needs to think about, and if they don't see it coming, then it can be goodbye. 2 of the new stride. The new stride is really powerful. It's a very good card, but it doesn't get as much of the shine as the rest of the G7 gets, because this card is really good if your field is like a lot of overtires or a lot of ChronoJets and you want to filter through your hand. If you have a bad hand or you have some pieces like overtire but you don't have the units that can time leap them, there are just dead cards on the end. With this you can unbrick your hand essentially. You can also go for a next stage turn where you can just strike or superior right into the next stage from your main deck, because as you can have seen we play 2 of those, and you can do a triple Vanguard swing, which is like all, around the same as Kagero can with their Legion Bird, and we all know how devastating it is. With this you can essentially do the same.
It's actually a pretty good strike, but maybe not meant for this deck. But most of the time, if you have
it's just an extra option.
Yeah, if you have that awkward hand that you think, okay,
it's plenty.
Yeah.
That's
pretty much plenty.
Yeah. Because most of the time you go into a history build twice.
So why 2 actually?
Why 2?
Why 2?
Because if you're against something like a Chaos opponent that has Lock Your Step already,
you go Vanguard centric.
You go Vanguard centric. You go for the triple Vanguard swing.
Understandable.
If you are against something like a Michael, your entire field is rested. Okay, I bind this because
you could use it as a first stride, right?
Yeah, you can use it as a first stride instead of next stage.
If it was kind of GB2 ability, then maybe only 1. Now with Tempest in this deck, you could still go 2.
Yeah, but then I would go 1 and like an extra option.
Yeah.
You have a lot of strides that also are singletons. So, and I play 2 Gear Goofy.
Yep.
As you can see, every card in this G-Zone is a Gear Dragon. But not every Gear Dragon works with other Gear Dragons. For example, you can have a Superior Right Vanguard and Eastern Vanguard, and that does the same. They are just both sides of the same coin, but in like different ways. You can also have like a Ragnar Clock, and you can combine it with everything else, also with history build, but you have some options where they don't cross each other. If you're playing like a history build and you have the Ragnar or the Quark, they don't work with each other. These binds your entire field, this time leaves your entire field, so that also doesn't work together. So you need to know what you're flipping for, what you're playing around, and with that you need to know what you want to do with this card.
Pretty much these are the 3 that you could target with this one.
Yeah.
And this one is kind of optional. Again,
it's optional
depending on the deck.
Yeah, if you
run out of the 2 and you still need to.
Yeah, but for example, it's just a third stride for everything.
Yeah, exactly. You could run it as everything, but in combination with.
Yeah, and goes for high power because it also gains time leap skill if it copies history build, and by that it also gains 9k usually.
Yep.
And then for last we have G cards. So I play
only 4.
5.
5. Okay.
Yeah. So we have 1 Urubu.
Big shield.
It's our biggest shield. It's the best G guard for us. For counterblast you usually get around like 20, 30, maybe even 40k.
Depending how deep you're into your G zone.
Yeah, on second strike you most of the time already have like GB9 or something like that. It's really insane because if you're copying, for example, you're essentially flipping 2 extra cards.
Yeah.
And
you already flipped 2, maybe with Tempest you already flipped 1 before, then you're pretty much on 6. Maybe
Can
7.
I just use your GB8?
You may. I think it would work in your deck perfectly.
In each deck it works perfectly.
Yeah. Attack with triggers.
Yeah, vanilla triggers. No, but it's just the biggest shield value we got. We only play 1 because it does have a heavy cost.
And it's a flip G guard, right?
Yeah, it's a flip G guard. So we played 2 Headround.
Yep.
He's there to interrupt your opponent's board when needed. You need to also know, once again, you need to know when you want to use them. If you're playing against a Nuba matchup and the opponent is striding into new stride, for example, and they don't know that you're having a Headround in your G zone, they need to keep 3 great zeros onto the field, and with this If they
Or they need to be very, very lucky.
or they need to be very brave.
Brave. Oh, I think brave is a good word for that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, but you can really interrupt most of the opponent's units because most of the opponent's units doesn't have resist anymore in like the G era. So that's why we play the Headrun Hunt. It's only a Soldier Skull, so it's not that big of a deal.
It's not heavy at all.
Yeah, and that can activate the stand we also played earlier, the Vanguard Dream Geargat. So your Vanguard has a trigger power of 10k.
Yeah, exactly.
10k. Then one Ravana. So if you have like a rested Chronocle from your field that you discard earlier, you can turn it into an Overton or TikTok worker every great shower you want and get a big fat shield.
Such good cards. You could also like use something to set up your field for next turn.
Yeah, precisely. You can have your TikTok if you just want to.
Could create more power on your finger. It's a very, very, very good card.
Yeah.
And this is when we talk about Gear Chronicle, these are kind of cards that we see, because it's cards that give you the options to go through your deck and to call the right cards to the field.
Yeah.
And thinking about the future, what you're gonna do next turn, or how to defend in this turn, these cards could make a big difference. You could also bluff with these kind of cards.
Yeah. Because if you have the stand, for example, on field, but you don't have a heal, so you can use his skill, the opponent still want to get rid of it.
And sometimes your opponent end the turn or do some other crazy plays or try to get that extra grade 0 to the field. Especially if people know this deck very well, then sometimes that hurt them more.
Yeah.
You could make some crazy plays.
Yeah,
with
this deck, I like it how it got so much support.
It's lots of fun to play as well.
Yeah.
And to play against also.
Yeah, I don't know that part. But
you had never faced Mr. Tiny?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, scooped out.
Maybe wait.
Okay. And one last Uru, just if you gone through most of your pieces in your deck, you can just refill them from your drop zone into your deck. One trigger, one normal unit is there just to have a little refund for your deck, because we have more pieces like a greater one, we have like a takeaway, but we don't play that in this deck. And that's the part also when it comes to power against consistency, but we still want a little bit consistency out of this.
The only G-Guard from the first G-Guards, because this is the first G-Guard of the clan, that still be played, because most others are outdated power creeps, but this card just for not the shield value, but more
for this fact. The fact is so important.
It has the same shield value as just the heal trigger.
Sometimes you also need to know when you want to use this, because you're not playing in the turn that you're defending, but you still need to think ahead of the turn you're going to do. So in that sense, you need to know, okay, what do I need to put back and what do I want to
This is what we talked about when we say the misplay, because sometimes you don't G-Guard to and use something else to defend, and then on next turn you will be like, oh, I don't have this card, and you don't know.
No,
but actually you already made a misplay by not G-Guarding and using to put the right card back to your deck. So it's a lot of times you are playing this deck and you don't know what you're doing wrong until somebody rewatched the match and he said you should have G-Guarded.
Yeah, precisely. There are many times where I was like, okay. No, there are a lot of times just when I played it myself that some people pointed to me out what I was doing wrong, and sometimes you don't see the mistake yourself. No.
And sometimes people point out things to you that you think, well, I could have done that, but then this would happen, and I don't want this happening, so I did this.
No, precisely. Even I am still learning from this deck, even though I played the deck hundreds of times or something like that. It's insane. But
it's rewarding.
Yeah, it's very rewarding. Yeah. You see it when a person first played this deck. I can see that with Daniel, I can see it with Pronk, because they also played it timely because of me. But you need to see the effort you have put into it into one of your last games when you're going into a tournament, you're playing it, and you need to play it at autopilot, for instance.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if you're just thinking for yourself, okay, what do I need to do again, then you're just not playing to the best effort you can.
It's nice that you pointed that out. Autopiloting is something that we talk about in our group a lot, especially going into huge tournaments like with a Swiss of 7 rounds and then playing a top 8, sometimes it's best of 3. The autopiloting helps you a lot to put your mind at ease a little bit, and then you kind of focus in the important matchups against the right people. And autopiloting can only become a skill of the player when he plays the deck
Yeah.
for a long time.
Yeah, because if you're just outpanning, let's say for example you have an Urt, you have your melon, you know what the combo is and when it's going to end.
Yeah.
And for that you can focus more on the important pieces. Okay, what do I want to guard for next turn? What do I have to need to get into the deck to make a better turn?
What do I have left in my deck?
Yeah.
What could I afford
Because
to lose?
Yeah, because you're searching essentially almost every attack by melon, and with that you can use that information to the best of your ability, and only if you have time left for that. So if you're outpanning, of course.
And sometimes while taking damage, you'll be like, please don't be this card, please don't be this card.
Yeah,
and you see
or if
it's
you're
this
drive
card.
checking something.
Yeah, and then you'll be like, oh hell, I should have guarded.
And that's why this card is really important, because most cards go to the bottom of the deck, so you don't drive check them.
Yep, exactly. Alright, so we talked about the deck. We could talk a little bit about the combo, but we already did show how the combo kind of work, also in the early game. So what are the weak points and the strong points where let's say there is a new player, because a lot of people want to build this deck.
Yeah.
So what are the things they have to keep in mind? Let's not talk about how to play against the deck. Let's just talk about what are things that those new players that want to play the deck have to keep in mind.
I would say that most people are overextending the plays.
Okay.
Sometimes you're just making a play and you're like, oh, I didn't need to call this card, for example, like a grade 2 that you want to time leap further into. But in the middle of your combo, you're like, oh, I don't have the time leap skills to time leap that specific unit. Or let's say, for example, you put a grade 0 onto the field and you're like, oh, I don't have the time leap skill to use that, so you're wasting 15k shield. You need to know what you're guarding for, what you're guarding against. And just if you're playing the micro game just good enough, then you can just pick this deck up, because if you're not guarding sufficient, if you're not playing sufficient with your cards, if you're just calling your history makers,
the deck will not work.
No, if you're just calling your history makers as a wild man in the early game, then it doesn't suit you, I think. Then you just play Overlord, for example, or something like that. That's more power enthusiastic instead of just multi-tagging.
Alright. Something else I would like to add, shadow box a lot. So mirror match yourself at home. This is one of the decks that could be very frustrating for your opponent to play against if you're taking too long, because you would have to know your plays before making them. So just chill at home, have the deck in your hand. I've seen Dave do this multiple times, like if he was watching a movie or a series, he just has this deck in his hand and he'd be like, okay, I could do this, I could do that. If I shuffle, this would be my hand, what would I do? So do that, take the time and effort into it, because that time and effort will be rewarding.
And what's also a very efficient way to learn is to know when you don't really need to shuffle, because sometimes you're like playing the melon and you're afterwards instantly searching the deck for another melon. Then you're like, okay, why the hell did I shuffle? Because I didn't draw a card in the middle of it or something like that.
Especially if your opponent doesn't understand the deck. Because playing this deck, you could go like crazy and you could misplay, and your opponent could not even understand what you're doing.
Just like get a dice ready to give your melon every time 4k, just to indicate to your opponent.
And explain it. I mean, explaining it once means your opponent would ask less questions, which means it would be easier for you to play.
Most of the time when I'm playing against someone who doesn't know the deck, I just tell them, okay, if you have any questions, just tell me. And if something is like missing or you don't have the proper information, just also ask them so I can explain to you maybe what's happening, what's on the field, what's the board status, and what can happen.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that's actually it. I'd like to thank you all for watching. Thank you to all the support you give to our channel. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and of course let us know in the comment section below if you're interested to see more from Gears. Because when it comes to Dave, he has a lot of knowledge when it comes to Gear Chronicle. The way he built, of course, his standard deck. We have already seen that on the channel. Make it as consistent as he can, of course. And you could always put some crazy combos into it. When going into premium, that's new words, let's say, because you have so many combos that you go into, so many ways to build a deck.
Yeah, and that's what I find, that Gears doesn't have the love of the community as much, because if you're just like searching a deck profile from Gears onto YouTube, you don't see actually a deck profile, in my opinion, that has like cool interactions or what you can possibly do. You don't see the shine of the Gear Chronicle in its prime, because I had never seen a player play something like Time Leap like this before, in my opinion. I'm like,
Yeah, maybe we see it, but we don't really see it that much often on YouTube. And if we see it built, then it's mostly kind of standard plus.
Yeah, standard plus with smoke.
You're not giving the clan justice by doing that.
No.
It's okay. It's a good deck. It's easy deck to get into, but it's not the best deck.
No.
And a Gear Chronicle player, as I said before, he searches that fine line between a combo heavy deck, less consistent, and the consistency of the deck, and going in between. That's your key. That's what you want to get. And we have a lot of good players when it comes to gears in our community.
That's definitely.
But we don't see them. Maybe we don't see them on YouTube much often. But also in big events, they don't always commit and to go there and top those big events.
No.
So it's very nice to see you doing that. And I think that most people were very happy to see those tops. Very happy to see Gear Chronicle represented this way.
Yeah.
And we are happy to have you on the team.
Yeah, it will be my first tournament playing this deck, and the last tournament.
Nice.
I will play it to the end.
Till the end of time.
Yeah.
Alright guys, thanks for watching yet again. Until next time.
Yeah, goodbye.